Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this evening plenary with the title Annual State of Renewable Energy 2023, Unlocking the Private Sector Finance. My name is Ahad Nazir. I head the Center for Private Sector Engagement at SDPI, and I will be your moderator for the whole of this evening. So without further ado, I'll start off with inviting Mr. Michael Williamson, Section Chief Energy Division, UNSCAP, for his opening remarks.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of SCAP, it's a real honor to be invited to address you this evening. It's always wonderful to join SDPI in their events. I see Dr. Khalid and Ubaid are the session organizers. They're our long-standing collaborators in so many different endeavors. I also see Mr. Mirza from PPIB is also on the speaker's bill, who has been an excellent cooperation partner with SCAP in the production of the SDG 7 roadmap for Pakistan. So this is a really hot topic that we're discussing this evening. It's the topic on everybody's lips, I believe. And for me, I start the topic with some optimism, because when I look at the fundamentals of Pakistan, it really puts us at an optimistic starting point, in the sense that Pakistan is blessed in its endowment of natural resources in terms of the sun, the wind, the hydro, and other renewable energy resources. Other countries cannot boast the same level of endowment of high quality renewable energy resources. So I think that is a good starting point. But let me kind of back up the perspective a bit to an Asia-Pacific regional one, because we work largely across the Asia-Pacific in 53 countries. When we look at SDG 7 broadly, we see from now to 2030 a shortfall of about $1.5 trillion per annum in investments related to SDG 7. Now that covers access to clean cooking, access to electricity, renewable energy and energy efficiency, but renewable energy is the lion's share of that investment. So to realize that level of missing investment, we need to shift the spending from fossil fuels towards renewables and energy efficiency. Plus, we need to redirect or mobilize whole new tranches of finance into this clean energy sector. And what we see across the region is a shortage of viable clean energy projects in a pipeline which have the right risk and return fundamentals for investment. So when we think in a macro sense about achieving SDG 7, everybody loves models. We use models to simplify very complex situations. And maybe the model to understand the road to SDG 7 is three parallel tracks. One track is technology. We need the clean energy technologies. The second track is policy. We need the policy structures and frameworks to enable all of this. And the third is finance. And I would suggest to you that there's a very good argument that finance is principal amongst those three. In fact, you might call it the binding constraint. So in modeling, we talk about what is the binding constraint. I believe it's actually finance. Because without finance, nothing else moves. We can have the best policies in the world, we can have the best technologies, but without finance, nothing is going to get built. But those three tracks are not independent tracks that we pursue in complete isolation. In fact, there's interlinkages. So it might look more like a DNA helix, where you have these three strands, this triple helix with these interlinkages between each one. Because, of course, policy will influence technology. Policy will also influence the environment for finance. So all of these threes are interlinked. And I think we all know, in fact, it's a truism, there is more than enough finance in the global system. What we have is an allocation problem. We cannot allocate the finance to where it needs to go. So when we talk about either public or private finance, we know that certainly there's not enough moving into the clean energy space. And indeed, when we talk about public finances across the Asia-Pacific region, we see limited fiscal space. We see this particularly in the follow-up from the COVID-19 pandemic. The response of countries was limited by the fact that they didn't have the fiscal space to mount the required stimulus. So when we talk about applying public finances towards the clean energy revolution, towards renewable energy expansion and SDG 7, we have to be extremely strategic in how we allocate public finance, because there's not enough to go around. We have to use it in clever ways, such as blended finance, guarantees, co-investments, and indeed technical assistance to draw in the private finance that's needed. So if we take a look for a moment at renewable energy as an investment class, and much of this description will also apply to energy efficiency, it's a very peculiar beast in the sense that it's capital intensive, it can be very high risk, particularly depending on which geography you're in, and so it has much more exposure to risk premiums compared to fossil fuels. If I build a gas-fired power station tomorrow and I look at the financials, if I take all of the costs and discount them back to year zero to get an NPV of that power station, 60% of the NPV will be the gas that I've yet to burn. So my price exposure is really far out into the future. When I build a wind farm, most of that investment is in year zero. Before I generate a single megawatt hour of energy, I've spent all of the money. So you can quickly see that renewable energy is a peculiar beast in that sense. It is really exposed to high cost of capital and really exposed to these risks, either real or perceived risk. And there are two very quick things that would help address some of those things. The first is a price in carbon. The second is elimination of fossil fuel subsidies. But maybe we'll come back to some prescriptions towards the end. So we did speak at the start about finance being on the critical path, as finance being the binding constraint on this journey towards 2030 and achieving SDG 7. And of course, policies have a role in unlocking some of these binding constraints with finance. So we know that in many countries of the region, we have banking systems which are not as robust as they should be, which are not really well positioned to invest in renewable energy. And we have capital markets which are underdeveloped. So this presents a long-term policy challenge to governments to address these sorts of structural issues to improve the flow of finance. There is also, of course, a great hope in terms of climate finance, because we have, as one example, Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, which allows for this flow of climate finance across border, where we can have countries invest outside their own borders in projects and activities that reduce emissions, and they can take those emission savings back to their home countries and count them against their own particular carbon accounting. We also have voluntary carbon markets where companies are seeking to reduce their carbon footprint. And there's a big market in investing in projects, including in things such as renewable energy. And I'm coming to you today actually from Kathmandu. So I'm in the SAARC region. I'm not too far away. And what we've been doing here over the last 2 days is discussing clean cooking, with today's discussion being on the financing of clean cooking. So into that discussion came a lot of observations and analysis on this voluntary carbon markets and Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. One of the key things there is that these projects should generate a series of ancillary benefits. In other words, it's not just all about the emission savings. And if we look at renewables, we can count off a whole range of ancillary benefits, from environmental through to social dimensions. So I think climate finance is one emerging and hopefully growing solution to this problem. So friends and colleagues, to close with a couple of maybe more concrete prescriptions or ideas, what might be some of the solutions that unlock greater flows of private finance? Really just starting from the Asia Pacific, but trying to move this contextually to Pakistan. A couple of ideas. Firstly, how do we reduce the risk? I think there's a couple of tools in the toolbox: public-private sector partnerships, any kind of ways that government can shoulder some of the risk to reduce that risk premium. And in Pakistan, you have the Pakistan Credit Guarantee Company. That might be one very good example. The second is trying to reduce these transaction costs by creating standardized commercial arrangements for projects. So that kind of reduces the transaction costs, the fixed costs, the uncertainty about starting these projects and coming up with commercial agreements. Another idea is reverse auctions for renewable energy projects for procurement of large quantities of renewable energy. And in many of our SDG 7 roadmaps that we've done with different countries, this has been one of the recommendations because it allows very effective price discovery of renewable energy costs and can push down the costs quite significantly. I think another really important point, which often escapes many of these discussions, is power grids, because power grids are incredibly important. Electricity is the fuel of the future for Asia Pacific in the 21st century. Every year, even though our overall energy bubble is growing, the slice of that pie that is electricity is also growing because more of our end uses are converting to electricity. And in fact, it's the electricity sector where we see most of the renewable energy being generated, such as wind and solar. So power grids are a bit like the key to unlocking all of this renewable energy capacity. We need to enhance power grids, we need to expand them. And in that context, encouraging private sector investment in power grids is one really important dimension. Historically, it's been the domain of public ownership and public investment, but there's a great role for private sector investment in enhancing power grids. I've been talking about clean cooking the last 2 days, so that's really where my head is at now. But when we think about innovation in business models, there are a plethora of examples in the clean cooking space about how new business models are emerging that allow businesses to invest, such as pay-as-you-go, indeed with the carbon financing, with using internet-connected cooking stoves that give much higher confidence in the attribution of emission savings. But I think there's a lot of scope for not just technology innovation, which everybody talks about, but business model innovation. And I think a further point, which is really relevant to energy efficiency, which is a related area, there's a strong role for governments there. Energy efficiency thrives where there is strong regulation. So we need to enhance regulations and standards, particularly for buildings. If we can get much stronger green building standards, we open the way for investment in all of the different technologies that make up a green building. So what I wanted to do was to share with you some of those thoughts as a bit of an opener or a primer for your discussions. I really look forward to the views that will be shared by other expert speakers. And once again, on behalf of ESCAP, thank you very much, and I wish you a successful conference.
Thank you, Michael, for these very insightful comments, especially concerning that most of the focus of our interventions have probably been around the electric power sector, whereas the energy sector as a whole needs to be taken into account. So next up, since the title of the plenary is having private sector in it, so we will go to Mr. Amir Paracha, who is the chairman of Overseas Investors Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also the Chief Executive Officer of Unilever Pakistan. Sir, we would like you to comment on how to better mobilize the private sector investment, and how are you as Unilever doing this at your stage? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ji. बहुत-बहुत शुक्रिया. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And first of all, thank you for allowing me to join virtually from Karachi for this very critical session on renewable energy. But before I start, I would like to begin by congratulating Dr. Abid Suleri and the SDPI team on successfully organizing this 26th Annual Sustainable Development Conference. And I must say the theme is very insightful and interesting, which is all about light at the end of the tunnel and hope in times of despair, which is both timely and very inspiring as well. I would also like to basically recognize here that SDPI and Unilever have been partnering on this agenda since 2022. And I remember last year we organized the first annual State of Renewable Energy Conference at our Karachi head office with the participation from the chairman, NEPRA. And many people actually ask what Unilever has to do with sustainable energy. And I think so because we are more into the fast-moving goods companies selling soup and ice cream and soap. Why energy? Because I think so that's something which is more a national agenda, and any organization, irrespective whether they play into this energy sector or not, has to be actively participating. And therefore, Unilever actually went ahead and partnered with SDPI last year. Today, I would like to offer you some food for thought on the importance of a renewable energy solution, not only from the lens of climate change impact, but actually more so from the perspective of building commercial solutions to fast track the climate action in Pakistan, which is desperately needed as we speak. As you all know, Pakistan is particularly vulnerable, as evident from the devastating floods last year. Now, climate change is no longer a distant future, and we all know, and everyone has talked about it. It's no more a poster child, which it was some 5, 10 years back. It is happening within our lifetimes and will shape the future of our generations to come. And this is something we owe to them. And therefore, we must prioritize long-term solutions here and invest in building a more climate resilient future. And I believe that's the key solution lies in the economic opportunity. Now, having said that, I have the privilege of sharing this view with you in my capacity as the president for the Overseas Chamber. And this chamber is a collective body of around 200 multinationals from 14 different sectors and 35 different countries. And some companies, multinationals, have been in Pakistan for the last 7 decades, 8 decades, and some of them are actually as old as the country itself, or some are actually even pre-partition times. And as some of Pakistan's largest investors, multinational organizations, are strategically placed to influence new investors to enter the supplier market, as well as influence global grants and FDI for clean transition. Since we are talking about the private sector sees climate action as a compelling business opportunity. Environmental sustainability is no longer just a matter of ethics. It has now become a strategic imperative for business. Companies that take proactive steps to address climate change, minimize environmental footprint, and invest in resilient strategies are not just doing the right thing, they're actually, as a matter of fact, are safeguarding their long-term financial stability and sustaining their competitive edge. Embracing climate action is actually a smart business decision. It has a clear commercial case alongside, being responsible to the planet. And the private sector is instrumental in driving investment and financing. And we have already seen significant contribution in areas like wind, energy, solarization projects, and public-private partnership on energy recovery. We all know, and we have been talking about it, that Pakistan has immense potential for renewable energy, which bring numerous benefits such as improved energy security, socioeconomic growth, reduced pollution, and mitigation of climate change. And to fully unlock the potential of renewable energy, Pakistan must adopt pragmatic and long-term policies which incentivize the use of renewable energy sources and gradually increase their contribution to the overall energy mix. Now, to successfully commercialize renewable energy, we must support the private sector for returns on investment, which require robust feasibility studies, transparent financial models, and clear risk assessment. Now, friends, I think so. Representing the private sector in a body of 200 multinational, what is most unnerving part for any international investor and also any local investor is the sustainability of the policies when it comes to investments. And I think so the problem that Pakistan is facing is there has been inconsistency. Any new government comes in on any new basically change of person that happens changes the policy. And that's the most unnerving part for any global financial investor. And I think so that's something that we really need to work. Relevant stakeholders must actively work to create a conducive financial environment, consistent policy, and regulatory provision provide stability and predictability. Enabling private sector invest to make long-term commitments. And finally, must implement risk mitigation tools such as insurance, guarantees, and offtake agreements to alleviate concerns and provide greater certainty to private sector investors. To me, the way forward for Pakistan must include the adoption of green financing tools to incentivize investments in sustainable infrastructure. And I remember back in 2017, State Bank of Pakistan, came up with a great package for all the multinationals and the locals, that if you basically go and solarize from grid to solar, you can actually get funding at 2 to 3%, which was very attractive. And many organizations benefited from very lucrative support from the scheme of State Bank of Pakistan. So when we put in place the right financial mechanism, we then attract domestic and international investors to fund renewable energy projects, energy efficient buildings, and sustainable transportation systems. And in addition to this, participating in carbon trading markets can also help to monetize Pakistan's efforts to reduce greenhouse emissions. This not only provides financial incentive for industry to adopt cleaner technology and practices, but it also helps Pakistan contribute to the global efforts in mitigating climate change. We also ask the government of Pakistan to expedite the power wheeling reforms. We have been kind of canvassing for the last 2 years now for renewable energy resources. This will not only reduce reliance on fossil fuels, but also improve the stability and reliability of the electricity supply. Yesterday alone, I just basically came across a very interesting video that Indonesia, because of lack of land, they've actually put up the solar plates on the waterbed, yeah, and these are floating solar panels on the waterbed. And I think so countries are coming with very creative solution of how to basically decarbonize the environment and move to sustainable energy. And finally, policy and regulatory consistency is crucial for providing a stable and predictable environment for sustainable development. The government must ensure the policy and regulations are aligned with long-term sustainable goals and provide clear guidelines for investors and business. These measures will not only contribute to countries' economic growth, but also help mitigate climate change and improve the well-being of their citizens. Towards the end, I would like to really thank all of you again for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. The OICCI and its members remain committed to being a part of the solution for Pakistan climate change. And I look forward to the rest of the discussion and the views of the expert gathering in this renewable energy. Thank you once again for your patience listening to me, and I look forward to some exciting outcome and some action coming out of this summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir Saab. I think it was really enlightening the way Unilever is responding to the climate challenges, as well as I think OICCI as an organization, as a business association working towards it. So we at STPI have formulated a national network of clean energy transition, under which we have a clean energy transition program. The findings of that, one of the reports will be presented afterwards. But one of the founders of the One of the founders of this program was Dr. Hina Aslam. She is a visiting fellow at SDPI, used to be a research fellow here, and she used to be the head of this China Study Center as well as the energy unit. She's currently the Hoffman Research Fellow at World Economic Forum and the Australian National University. So if I can request Dr. Hina for her remarks, please. Thank you.
Good evening and Assalamu alaikum. Very glad to be here. Fortunately, our timelines made that I'm very lucky to be part of this baby that we founded back in 2020, 2021. And now we have come really far. And with the developments and the uprise of this network, along with the partners and association, with the support of member organizations, with the support of our senior management of STPI, I'm really, really happy that I'm standing here and representing STPI still as a part of the energy team, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of how we all came up to this stage, and of course, going beyond the next coming years. So the annual state of renewable energy, we started it back in the last year, where we had the first annual state of renewable energy report that we launched with Unilever Pakistan in Karachi, with the support of all the member organizations, the government, CSOs, academia, and all our stakeholders who have been part in contributing to this project massively, and with the dedication to support the government in their alternative renewable energy policy 2019, and all the other policies to meet the climate goals, to meet the net zero transition, and of course, the global climate efforts towards combating all of these climate change impacts that we are facing. So let me begin with what is actually NCET, Network for Clean Energy Transition in Pakistan. It was basically evolved in terms of looking at the gaps and demand in the space, where we needed an effective collaboration, a collective effort towards marking the need for the energy transition through evidence-based policy. So STPI is a research organization well-equipped with capacity of the researchers, but how well we could communicate our research through the evidence, through this platform, and advocacy and consultations, and make the journey most impactful. That was the vision and the purpose and the major drive behind this network. So that in turn, we would aspire to see an acceleration in the renewable energy uptake in Pakistan, and contributing significantly towards limiting the carbon emissions, and also ensuring affordable and reliable access to energy. In terms of the key outcomes that we targeted at the inception, was to promote the technical knowledge on policy planning for cleaner, accessible, and reliable energy. Also, we, through our research, we collectively have the findings and insights on the technology transfer for curbing the greenhouse gas emissions to fight the climate change. Also, developing and propose a framework to share the newly emerging green technologies, practices, and low carbon solutions. Increase sectoral cooperation, interprovincial cooperation, and international collaborations to lower the cost of electricity and energy, and to secure the grid. And last but not the least, green financing. That is the topic of today as well, where we are emphasizing on. So the role of green bonds, the sustainable finance instruments, and tools to stimulate and enhance private sector investments. I'm very proud to mention that the network has the ownership from most of the key stakeholders, and I would like to name a few. So starting from a great appreciation for Mr. Shahjahan Mirza, Ministry of Energy, PPIB, CPPA, AEDB, Ministry of Climate Change, Ministry of Planning, Development, Special Initiatives, Ministry of Water Resources, Natural Disaster and Risk Management Fund, provincial governments, and more. In terms of private sector, we just heard from Amir Paracha, Unilever, Karandas, Pakistan. We have Nestle, we have banks, JS Bank, HPL, and many other private sector entities who are part of it. Development partners include World Bank, diplomatic missions, embassies here, and CSOs. We are part of the Renewable Energy Coalition of CSOs in academia that has been running for the last 3 years now, and that is making a lot of progress and incredible efforts. So the network is operating under different subgroups to make it more concrete and more focused on how we could bring out the best in each of the domain. So these domains are the Renewable Energy Working Group, particularly working on the technical side of renewable energy systems. Corporate Sustainability Group, looking at it from the sustainability perspective and the other tools. Green Financing Group, of course, from the green financing instruments and models. And the Energy Transition Diplomacy Group, where we have to engage with the embassies, with the missions here, diplomatic missions here, to understand and have this space for possible collaborations of knowledge transfer and capacity building. So since its inception, the STPI has conducted over 70 policy dialogues, webinars, and panel discussions on the topic, including 7 high-level conferences, dedicatedly and renewable energy conferences, clean energy summits, and more, capacity building and training of trainer workshops, so almost 8 of them, and published over 20 research reports, 7 policy briefs, and along with that, more of the support that was provided to the outcomes like Pakistan Climate Development Report by World Bank and many others to support the government of Pakistan in uptaking renewable energy. Some other milestones that I'm very happy to mention here is we launched SDG 7 Roadmap of Pakistan in collaboration with UNESCAP and PPIB at COP27. We also support Pakistan's stance on energy transition at COP27. The team also supported the African Lighting Amendment and COP4 and COP5 of Minamata Convention. And we are very pleased to announce that this year the amendment has successfully passed, assuring the phase out of mercury-based lighting across the world. And also, we have been jointly collaborating with private sector actively to mobilize efforts in this space, especially one of the major one with OICCI. So this is the annual State of Renewable Energies and flagship conference. This is the second one that we're marking at STC, and more to come every year. And it's a flagship report of STPI as well that is pivotal in providing a knowledge-based platform coming from all the policy, from the technical perspective, and also tracking the progress of the policies of the RE growth and upscaling that the country needs on an annual basis. This year and beyond, we are continuing the same, and we are analyzing specific case studies on, let's say, wind curtailment issues and more. So with this, there's, I think, just like I said in the beginning, we have come a long way, but still we are far from what we aspire to do, and not just us as a collective effort. We are not just STPI's network, but we are very fortunate to have participation from the key actors and the stakeholders towards meeting the journey that we all aspire to do. Me being part of the STPI now remotely and also as a visiting faculty, I take this privilege to make these important connections with the global world. And I aspire that this network makes stronger connections with the international networks, where we have more space, more opportunity to grow with the world and equip ourselves with more knowledge, more capacity, more information, more technology, more innovation, and mark our efforts towards the uptake of renewable energy and fighting climate change. This is all from my side. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Ahad. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hina, for highlighting the network of clean energy transition, as well as other aspects that the STPI team has been working on in terms of energy. So next up, we have a brief presentation, which is basically unlocking the private sector financing. If I can have the presentation on. So mainly, what this presentation deals with is that just like I think Michael Williamson gave us a very good start at the beginning by saying that we need to model our data and information available according to the need of the time. But unfortunately, what we have observed is that while a lot of focus has been on the nationally determined contributions, but none of the models that we have actually have NDCs as an input. Rather, some of the outputs have somewhat gelled up with the NDCs. So just taking this forward, this presentation just highlights some of the key areas where financing needs can be improved. And then we have a small brief case study on wind curtailment that has taken place during the last few years. So the existing scenario or the situation analysis is that we are at the moment being faced with a complex array of crises. It's a poly crisis. We have conflict, which affects the value chain, supply chains around the world, and has an impact on everything, including the energy prices and availability. Secondly, we have climate change, which we have to deal with, and somehow I think the realization regarding climate change has increased over the few years. And then, of course, we are still recovering from the shock we got during the COVID-19. So the post-COVID recovery is not fully there. So all these crises eventually have sort of collaborated to make the economic, the socio-economic fabric of Pakistan and of course of other countries as well are very difficult over this time, last 2-3 years. But despite we have a large potential for climate financing, Pakistan has largely been off track with regards to it. And majorly, we have depended on the bilateral grants in this case, but we have not been able to sort of develop a mechanism like carbon markets or any other mechanism so that there can be a sort of an indigenous solution to this climate crisis. And of course, Pakistan, the commitments that Pakistan has made as a result of the Paris Agreement and other agreements, they also remain off track. While we were working, I think some of the data gaps around climate financing also needs to be taken care of. Especially, we don't have demand sector based analysis. The mechanisms also are not clear in the literature as well as the data. And of course, there is a sort of a lacking clarity and enabling environment for private sector to be financing this. So the policy backing, as we call it, is somewhat missing. And of course, we also believe that there is a lack of technical expertise and institutional capacities there as well. But there is, of course, a huge opportunity here. A substantial share of the investments are available in the private sector of Pakistan. Just like, for instance, when we wanted to move to CNG, there was an automatic sort of appetite there. So I think those type of criteria or those type of incentives, although this example might not be a very correct one based on the type of incentives that we offered back then, but I think those are the kind of incentives that we need to give to the private sector in order for us to really transition to clean energy. So with this, we envisaged this project with, of course, the USAID and PFAN. And this project was based on basically identifying these tools and instruments that can be used to sort of create this opportunity for the local private sector as well as the international organizations to invest in Pakistan. So this the major activities were divided based on 3 outcomes. The first one, of course, we wanted to sectorally distribute the private sector investments and analyze how can they be diverted into clean energy transition. For example, real estate investments, how can they be converted into clean energy transition based projects. And then, of course, we analyze the key parameters that can shift the private sector investments towards the clean energy transition. And then, of course, we also highlighted the barriers and challenges for the private sector climate financing, and of course, the policy advice, the policy interventions and mechanisms that are needed to be deployed to address these challenges. Based on the methodology, majority of the methodology was qualitative, but of course, we did some secondary data analysis, and based on that, some of the results will be displayed in the slides to come. So majorly, we have these 3 types of climate financing that can take place. And of course, our focus majorly was on the energy sector, which included the electric power as well as other energy related sectors like transport and others. So there are some domestic sources, both public sources as well as private sources. But personally, coming from the energy sector, having spent more than 15 years in the energy sector, I believe that the public investment into energy has been quite enough. I think it's about time that we make this sustainable through private sector involvement. Then, of course, we have the development partners, the multilateral banks, the multilateral funds, and the capital markets. So these are primarily the, so based on World Bank CCDR report, updated NDCs, and the author's own calculations, we were able to sort of calculate the needs, the financing needs of Pakistan in line with the NDCs targets that have been updated. So the majority, and this is something that we have been sort of contributing to, we have been writing about it, that the major chunk of the investment should go to power distribution and transmission area. A lot of investment has gone into generation, but this probably is the missing link in the value chain, which have been totally missed. And then the second one is hydropower. Then came the wind energy, and of course, that was followed by coal buyout and solar, and then replacement with solar. And for the other energy sectors, especially with regards to energy efficiency in industries and buildings, and of course, the transportation sector, we have also calculated that around 57 billion by 2030 will be required, $57 billion by 2030 will be required as part of the climate financing. So so during the year 2021, the gross fixed investment in Pakistan was around 36.7 billion, where 28% was contributed by the private sector, public sector, and 72% by the private sector. And this is basically this 72%, this chunk eventually has to be targeted into climate friendly and clean projects. So these are some of the major areas where this investment went into. The majority of investment went into agriculture, mining, and quarrying. And we can also display here that 73.1% of the loans that State Bank of Pakistan issued went into manufacturing sector. So these, of course, are some of the highlights that can be used in devising future policies. And of course, we have the public-private partnership based initiatives as well. So these are, of course, when we have these major areas, textile power, real estate, the disaster risk financing, and the agriculture, then it is I think it's very easy for the textile parties to be shifting to climate friendly aspects. So one case study that we did, not as part of this report, but another report, was the wind curtailment, and one of the barriers that we saw in the private sector financing. So when wind energy projects were envisaged in the late 2000s, and first wind power plant was established, I think, in 2013, some of the major reasons for private sector investing into them was that there was a very good payback period. And one of the reasons was that the must-run plants and as much energy as they produce was supposed to go into the grid, which is not the case actually. So now we have seen that there has been a lot of curtailment. Some of the curtailment during the last year have been displayed here. And of course, these values include the non-project events as well. But NPMV, the non-project events are taken care of, are paid to the wind power producers. But almost 65% of the revenue based on one of the discussion is actually being wasted. Some of the reasons that contribute to curtailment are low system demand period, insufficient network capacity, and abrupt system changes due to abnormal weather conditions. And of course, when we talk about CPPAG and NEPRA, they have given reasons that the system stability in case of renewable energy is very low. Other reasons that we found out during the consultations and interviews was the addition of nuclear, thermal coal, and KE 900 RLNG plants, low system demand and inadequate down regulation, insufficient capacity on the south-north transmission corridor, and challenges in forecasting. So I'll just end with the recommendations. I'll just take 2 minutes. I think the major issue here is that we need to have sort of a scrutiny for the policies we make. So there is a term that lawyers use, which is the post-legislative scrutiny. I believe we should have a post-regulative scrutiny as well as a post-policy scrutiny to see whether the policies were implemented in the same spirit as they were developed. And second, what type of changes in the policy were actually required? How agile were these policies? So some of the recommendations are of course very specific, so I'll skip them. And another aspect that we can work on is towards the e-mobility, the electric vehicle side. For the electric vehicles, of course, we have prepared a report as well, and it is also part of the PFAN report, that initially I think that the critical mass required for the production facilities of electric vehicles that should be included here require that the public-owned vehicles can be shifted first towards electric, so that we can sort of create that critical mass for the production to start. So I'll just end here, and this presentation will be shared with all of you. Of course, I had to, in the interest of time, I had to skip through some of the slides. So next up, I would request our chief guest for the session today, Senator Dr. Musaddiq Malik. Senator Saab has been a member of the Senate since March 2018 and has also served in very relevant positions as Minister of State for Petroleum as well as Water and Power Resources. So over to you, sir. Sir, please. And if I can request the remaining panelists to please come on stage.
you very much. At the beginning, just about 5-7 minutes ago, Dr. Hina said that we have come a long way. When I think about where we are, it appears to me that we have to go a longer way, and frankly, a much longer way. We have an aspiration. I mean, there's so many ways of looking at today's kind of renewable energy discussion that we're having. I have chosen to speak to it from the political lens, from the policy lens, from the national lens, if I were to say so. We have an aspiration, and I think this aspiration is shared across, hopefully, all political parties. Our aspiration is first and foremost to ensure availability of energy, because the most expensive form of energy is not having it. And therefore, it's mission critical for us to make sure that over the next decades of hopefully growth and development, we are fully energized. We're a big country. We're about 230, 240 million people. And the way we are growing, by the year 2050, we're going to be roughly 350 million people. I hope our population planning wing basically pays special attention to this, because this kind of growth is completely unsustainable. But nevertheless, we have to plan. We have to plan for energy. For every 1% growth in GDP, depending upon what kind of industrial and commercial footprint we have, we're going to require anywhere from a multiple of 1.7 to 2. So if you look at that, you can figure out how much more energy we're going to require. Whether you look at it from the population and per capita utilization perspective, which is the lowest in the region, or you look at it from the industrial and commercial footprint and GDP growth perspective, no matter how you look at it, one thing is amply clear, that we're going to require a lot of energy, the energy that we do not have. So first and foremost, aspiration for us is to make sure that we have energy security or energy availability. I think the second, and in that, I would like to say one thing, that in Pakistan, if you look for a common man, there are two sources of energy, mostly. One is electricity and the other is gas. I mean, there are sources of energy for industrial footprints. There are multiple sources of energy, but if you go to the poor people of Pakistan, and because we're taking a people-centric approach in this discussion, I've chosen to take a people-centric approach. So people have two sources of energy. Less than 30% of the people are connected to gas, about 27%. And about 93% to 95% of people are connected to electricity. So if we were to ensure that people have energy available, this country will have to get electrified. So electrification, I think, is going to be a big thrust for us, because that's the only way. LPG is not the solution. LNG is not the solution, because how many more pipelines can you put, and where all can you take these canisters of LPG? People are already connected, rich and poor. 93 to 95% of people of Pakistan are already connected to electricity. So electrification, which is also aligned with the global trend, so it's not like we are alone in this universe, is the way to go. Our second aspiration is affordability. Now, electrification may well be the answer, but at 60 rupees a unit, is it really an answer? I was looking at the BISP data, and I found that the fourth quintile, 4 out of 5 households, the average income of the fourth quintile is roughly 65,000 rupees per month. Now, if you're making 60,000 rupees per month, and I'm not talking about the first quintile, second, third, I'm not talking about 25,000, 35,000, 44,000. I'm talking about the highest, the fourth quintile, after which there's only 1 quintile left. If the average household income is 65,000 rupees, how can you afford 10,000 rupees in electricity bill? And if you have 60 rupees worth of a unit going to 64, 65, 69, it's amply clear that may as well not provide energy to people because they cannot afford it. So our second aspiration is to make sure that we not only have energy available, but it's also affordable. And in terms of affordability, what could be more affordable than 3 cents worth of solar, or 4 cents or 5 cents? Between 3 and 5 cents, if you can get renewables, why would you not get them? Why would you not have all the roofs that you see across Pakistan as sources of energy? What is stopping us? We have wind. Why are we not tapping into the wind? And amazingly, Pakistan, solar and wind is counter-cyclical, which basically means the sun rises and the wind goes down. And when the sun goes down, the wind gust rises. So if you can have a hybrid solution between wind and solar, if you can have all the rooftops as the sources of energy, if you can have larger farms, but also have smaller solutions, why would you not make energy more affordable? So it's a slam dunk. It's an obvious answer. We have to move towards renewable energy if we want to enhance the affordability. And that means solar, that means sun rises, you have energy, wind blows, you have energy, the ocean moves, you have energy, geothermal, you have energy. There's so many sources of energy. Every canal is a source of energy. Every flowing river is a source of energy. And if you tap into it and created a balanced portfolio, I think we would be in a better place than the place where we're at right now. And a third aspiration is sustainability. Now, sustainability is a complex phenomenon. We are suffering from 3 kinds of sustainabilities. Our sustainability has become suspect in 3 different manners. The first and foremost, and the most obvious is the environmental. If you look at Pakistan, we're lying as almost as a valley under the belly of the Himalayas. And with the slight change in environment and the rate of flow of glaciers or the rate of melting of glaciers, your entire barrage system getting blown away. One gush and the entire system would be blown away. Change of climate where people basically do traditional farming. We'd basically not only face the issues of climatic changes in environment, we'd also face issues of food security. So when we look at the heat map, you can't even spot Pakistan. We have nearly negligible carbon footprint, but we are the 5th or the 6th most susceptible in terms of climate, the most susceptible nation in the world. So not for the sake of our region and not for the sake of the world, but for the sake of our own children, we have to make sure that we're environmentally responsible. We have to make sure that we do things which give us not only energy and affordable energy, but also sustainability over a long period of time. And we get our brown footprint greener and greener and greener. We have another challenge of sustainability as well, and that's fiscal sustainability. We import what, 25 billion, right, sir? $25 billion worth of energy, right? Sometimes more, depending upon the oil prices, depending upon the global prices of petroleum products, LNG, petroleum products, gas. We don't have that money. Our total export ranges from 22 billion to 27, 28 billion. How can we import energy for 22 to 25 billion dollars? It's fiscally, in terms of our external sector, it's not sustainable. And therefore, we have to find indigenous solutions. And what could be more indigenous than sun? What could be more indigenous than wind? What could be more indigenous than a flowing river or a flowing canal? So not only from the environmental sustainability, but also from the fiscal sustainability, it is imperative that we move towards the renewables. The third kind of sustainability issue that we have is trade sustainability. I mean, this carbon accounting thing that is going on is not benign, I promise you. It's not benign at all. This is the new generation of trade barrier. Very soon, every garment that you export, every little shoe that you export, they're going to track the carbon footprint on that. And they're going to put penalties. I mean, Europe has already come up with this, with the entire scheme of penalties that they're going to appropriate based upon the carbon footprint on every product that is exported. So this is a whole new way of creating an entry barrier, a new generation of entry barrier. So from trade perspective as well, although right now our textile industry doesn't see it or our leather industry doesn't see it, but as you move forward and all of a sudden these barriers come down on you, you would see how they're used, not just in the way of trade, but also in the way of politics, geopolitics. So for all of these reasons, I would say from the availability perspective, from the affordability perspective, and from the sustainability perspective, it is critically important that we move towards the renewables. But in moving towards the renewables, there are many benefits that will come along as I speak. I would enumerate them. But the most important thing is that we'll have to manage this transition. It is not just taking the switch and turning it off and on and off and on. We just about remember last year we had, you know, the power breakdown, which lasted about a day and a half, complete blackout across the country. I was in charge of the committee that was formed to look into it. And you know what happened? We had 700 megawatts of wind energy coming into our grid system early in the morning, while some of our circuits were off. And the entire country went into darkness. So if you're going to manage this transition, we'll have to strengthen our grid. We'll have to strengthen our transmission system. And we'll have to manage. In order for us to produce reactive energy all the way from south to the north, with all the energy imbalances and the flows that we have, it is mission critical that we have reactive energy all along these 2,000-kilometer corridor or however long it is. And therefore, without strengthening the transmission system and without strengthening the distribution systems, this is just a pipe dream. So we'll have to make a transition. We'll have to make a comprehensive plan where we continue to add, continue to go green, and continue to strengthen our grid. This would also help us get the second important thing, as I mentioned earlier, that we need to move from gas as a household kind of energizing source to electricity. It would also take care of our capacity trap. Our capacity trap exists because in summers we have 30,000 megawatts of electricity. In winters, this demand drops to 10,000, sometimes 8,000, mostly between 10 and 12,000. So there's difference between 20,000 megawatts that we require in summer and we have no use for that during the winter, accounts for the big capacity trap. If we go electric and all of the household water heater systems and space heating systems and so on and so forth, they went electric, the electricity demand would pop up, would surge. And the difference between summer and winter would shrink. I don't know how much it would shrink, but let's assume it becomes 22,000 versus 30,000 or 25,000 versus 30,000. We'll get out of the capacity trap. So therefore, managing this transition in the way of capacity trap, in the way of making sure that the cost of electricity goes down, because people are not stupid. There's no way you're going to sell 60 rupee unit to people, poor people of Pakistan, and expect that they are going to move their water heaters and going to move their cooking ovens or cooking ranges or cooking chulas to electricity. There's no way. So you will have to break the elite capture. This 1/3 of the gas of Pakistan that goes to 5 industries, it will have to be redirected. It will have to be redirected in the way of base load to the most efficient plants that we have. You know, the most efficient plants that we have, Bikki, Haveli, Bahadur Shah, these are GE turbines with 62% electricity. Right now with LNG, The cost of production alone at these plants is 26 rupees, 24 to 26 rupees per unit, just the cost of production, cost of generation. If you used wellhead gas, this number drops to 7 rupees. Now, why would we not allocate wellhead gas to these enormously efficient power plants and create a balance, create a base load, which is then supported by the green renewables? That's also, it's not clean energy. Gas is not clean energy, but a relatively cleaner energy. So if you create a blend and make the electricity cost come down, then strategically you can ask people, when the cost of per unit cost drops down to, I don't know what the affordable range would be, 10 rupees, 15 rupees, 20 rupees, then you can ask people to move towards electrification. Short of that, they would not agree with you. So these are the challenges of transition that we have. And in that, I've also mentioned the biggest challenge that I have encountered in my 16, 17 months at the Petroleum Ministry, the elite capture. We'll have to fight it out. There's no way out. This country belongs to the poor people of this country. And there are far too many. And when they rise, these people would not have an option. But I think before they rise, it's important from the policy perspective that we stand up to this elite capture. And we move our resources to the most optimal use. And the most optimal use is the use that creates employment for the people, that decreases the economic burden of energy for the common person. And we need to do that redirection. And I'm sure we do that. What is our path forward? Our path forward is to, I would not enumerate all the projects. I think Shah Jahan Sahab is here. So I'd leave it in his safe hands because I don't want to take too much of the time of time. But we have listed 4 or 5 very specific renewable projects. I hope you, can I leave that to you, sir, rather than discuss it? So he would list all of those projects. So the project perspective is that things that are already happening, please, whoever comes back, let them happen because they're good for the country. They're good from all 3 perspectives. So let them happen. From the regulatory perspective, a lot of work has to be done. No one is going to invest in Pakistan if we don't have the ease of doing business. Honest to God, I mean, even as a member of the cabinet, I cannot get things done. It's that hard. Imagine an investor coming in and trying to go through the rigmaroles of the government and getting things done. So we have to digitize. We have to make things very easy. You know, just the way you apply for visas, you cannot upload your application unless all the paperwork is complete. It should be just like that. You only upload your application once all the requirements are done, and then that's that. And there's specific time frames that if you don't get an answer in 10 days, you can deem this is okay. If you don't get it in 60 days, you can deem the rest is okay. If you don't hear anything in 90 days, you get the license. Because we need to move the burden towards us. People who sit in these secretariat halls, you know. And in order for us to do that, we'll have to digitize, we'll have to make it transparent, we'll have to make it online, and make sure that there's no secondary market in terms of transacting. Ye kagaz de do, agar ye kagaz nahi hai, iske upar ye nahi likha hai. It only, the electronic formats, you only upload the application once everything is complete, and then there's no stopping. I also think the second most important thing is level playing field. Because there's no way the government is going to subsidize. We cannot subsidize. And not because of IMF. We cannot subsidize for the sake of our own children. We cannot subsidize states at the expense of taxpayers. It's just not right. And therefore, we have to create a level playing field. And we have to let the competition sort out what the tariff rates are going to be. People come, people bid, people compete. They bid on tariff, and the lowest tariff basically just gets it. So keep it simple. And let's not get into this rigmarole of, you know, what kind of risk mitigation the government, what is the government going to do? The government can only improve its risk if it becomes, its macroeconomic conditions improve, and its macroeconomic conditions are only going to improve if we stop giving subsidies, particularly to the rich. So one is the ease of doing business, and the second is level playing field and fierce competition. And the third is deregulation. So these are the three pillars on which we have to move forward. What is the wild card? The wild card is geopolitics. And I'd close on this. When I was the minister, I was made to believe that the world is one big global village. We're all interwoven into a fabric. And then the Russian-Ukraine war started. And the price of LNG went from $40 million a cargo to $165 million a cargo. And we looked at the same world which was telling us, let's go green, let's go green, let's go green, because we're all interwoven into one global fabric. We looked at the world and we said, what about us? And they said, what about you? And in that moment, we realized that we are not even a patch on that fabric, not even a patch. So I was quite surprised when I realized that Germany had opened up its coal mines. And Germany had started again the production of its coal-based electricity. And I said, interesting. Our coal was brown. What's theirs? Yellow with orange polka dots. So this anomaly of geopolitics can hit us anytime. All the more reason why we depend more and more and more on our indigenous resources. All the more reason why we should go sustainable, we should go green, and we should go green in our own image, based upon our own assets. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. So next up, I would be requesting Ms. Rabia Bukhari, Development Program Specialist, Energy and Climate at USAID, to briefly tell us about the role of USAID in unlocking the private sector financing. Thank you.
Good evening and Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the invitation. Very happy and excited to be part of the panel and among so many higher dignitaries who speak ahead of me and after me. I think a lot of perspectives has already been shared in terms of the approaches we need to take and various instruments and various things which we need to introduce. Definitely Mr. Michael, Dr. Hina, Senator Musaddiq rightly pointed out a lot of things which we all as a nation has to do. But how USAID has been actually supporting over the decade. I've been associated with energy sector for past 12 plus years. So I've seen all the evolution in 10, 12 years over the time. And I think we say that government needs to do this and that. There are many positive sides of the government initiatives as well, which I would like to draw some of our attentions to that. I would not steal all the thunder away from Mr. Shah Jahan, that who would be really going into details and talking about how government is taking certain steps in terms of promoting more competition, how they're doing more level playing field so that there's more private sector coming in the country and participating and investing in the renewable energy space. So most of the work which USAID has done in the past decade has been more or less in the clean energy space. We have invested in Jhimpir, Gharo wind projects through debt financing, through direct technical assistance support in terms of building transmission lines so that the power can be evacuated. We understand the curtailment issues are there, the renewables are intermittent, we need to improve our grid stability. And there are a lot of technologies which are already introduced in the advanced economies. While we being emerging economy has always been suffering for one or the other reason. When we try to go and are on a right path and track, something happens, a natural disaster like which hit Pakistan last year. That changes really the whole trajectory which we are operating under with. Similarly, as Senator Malik pointed out, the geopolitics, we were just looking behind in terms of what happens for Ukraine and Russia war. Here we have just recently entered into another war in the Middle East. So how all this geopolitics is affecting the food security, the overall environment, all the global economies are also equally, I think, suffering in terms of meeting their climate commitments, their clean energy transition goals. So it's not only being Pakistan, we are really behind. We are off track on our commitments and our goals. But I think the government and all the development partners are standing with government, making a lot of good strides in terms of helping achieve those targets. Obviously, we have another 5 to 7 years window of opportunity to really achieve our targets, but I think we need to diversify in terms of how we have been doing business. We need to change in terms of our system thinking, in terms of our mindsets. When we talk about clean energy transition, obviously industrial sector decarbonization plays a very important role, and setting these really stage for looking at how industry also has to go green and what are the incentives. I'm not in favor of subsidies at all, and I would not promote that. As Mr. Malik already rightly pointed out, we have to move away from these things. But how some of the innovative financial instruments can really bring that transition fast forward, how we can accelerate it, basically. So we need to really look into impact investing, where we have not been looking at really societal and environmental issues as a whole when we develop and implement our projects. If we would do that, obviously, the impact would also matter, that what it is doing for our people, where we are building those projects. What is it doing in terms of livelihoods? So I think I would like to really draw our attention in terms of really promoting more public-private partnerships, looking at how we can utilize our small investments as catalytic to really leveraging and mobilizing other sources of finance. For example, USA just very recently stepped in and helped WWF in getting the GCF funding. It's a $78 million project, and in front of that $78 million, USA only invested and committed $5 million. So that's a very small amount compared to $78 million project. But then that $5 million, if would not have been there, the Green Climate Fund would not have given them the investments that they needed in terms of grant. So that is the first project which is doing an ecosystem-based adaptation project in Pakistan, developing green infrastructure, how to recharge our water systems, creating awareness. So that is bringing really innovative approach. There would be a lot more projects similar to this in future coming in. Another pilot which USAID is exploring right now is in the dairy and livestock sector, how we can reduce our methane emissions. That is around 45% of our emissions comes from dairy and agri sector. The other 45 comes from energy sector. It's important that we promote more renewables, but I think for climate mitigation, there are other areas as well which we need to focus, where we need to mitigate our emissions. Although we are not the big contributor to emissions, but we have to curtail our emissions so that it's not increased to the level that it's going beyond the control. So USAID has been really working alongside government in introducing competition in the power sector in terms of procuring future power and also level the playing field. We are also supporting, we were the pioneers who actually brought the credit guarantees as a risk mitigation tool for the financial sector so that they can promote more lending into green energy projects. So I really feel that while we are talking about increasing more renewables, it's important that we also talk about how we have to develop our human capital at the same time, because that's the key. And a lot of job creation also comes from small, medium enterprises. I think they play a very important role in terms of any economy. They are the backbone of any economy. So USAID actually entered into this SME space to support clean tech SMEs, e-mobility startups, and other SMEs in agri, in tourism, in logistic, and similar other sectors, which actually need sometimes a very little support in terms of transaction advisory, technical assistance, or catalytic funding in the form of small grant, or something which can really leverage a lot more other resources for their projects' growth. So we have really developed a local ecosystem in terms of supporting the SMEs in various ways of, in various sectors. And one of that example, definitely Amar would share from PFAN, that how PFAN, funded by USAID, has actually brought their model in Pakistan and supported various some of these initiatives. I think going forward, the greening the supply chains for our businesses is also going to be very important, that we have to look at how we all have to grow our minds to be green. It's not easy shift, and it's not an easy transition, but I think small steps slowly and gradually can take us up to a level that where we will be able to stand on strong footing, saying that here we are with innovative financial models and instruments and meeting our various commitments and goals for that reason. So knowledge sharing, experience sharing, technology transfer, all of these different things are really equally important. And there are a lot of other efforts which are ongoing from USAID, which we are supporting. And in the future also, we would be really working closely on preparing the project's bankability for Green Climate Fund or other international funding sources to provide catalytic funding, to provide blended finance options, technical assistance sort of opportunity, so that we can bring more climate finance in the country. We are behind on those targets, but I think we are making progress. A lot of development partners, including USAID, is taking a lot of work and initiatives which are being implemented right now, and we would start to see the results in coming years. Another important step, I think, is going to be looking at the monitoring and evaluation systems. Maybe we are already on track, maybe we are not behind, but since we don't have a robust monitoring and evaluation system to track our results, because it's a huge country, we have huge population, we have a lot of provinces. So how we have to really track our every effort, every initiative which we are taking, and how that is contributing to actually clean energy transition or greening the economy, I think can play an important role. And for that reason, definitely carbon pricing, carbon trading, or voluntary markets, and so many other things would be important. But setting up a robust system to monitor and track on results and how the funding is spent is really important. And lastly, I would leave it with that I think we have the liquidity in the country in terms of financial resources. Our homegrown private sector is very capable. They bring expertise, they bring financing. Our financial sector is very, established. They know how to work things out. They have green banking guidelines. They have state bank backing on a lot of things. It's only that they need to be innovative in terms of coming up with innovative solutions for green banking and really coming up with products which promotes more green financing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we really appreciate the work being done by USAID and especially your interventions regarding the human resource development. I think the sort of issues with the subsidy regime and also the geopolitics are highly appreciated. So next up, I will like to call upon Mr. Ahmed Amar Yasser, Chief of Party, Pakistan Private Sector Energy, PPSC Activity, PFAN. Mr. Amar Yasser has been one of our older partners, and as well as he's the host for today. But just one question that I would like to pose to you is regarding the challenges that we have at the moment in the local landscape, investment landscape. How would you see the international landscape with regards to energy investing?
Thank you, Ahad. And it would be difficult for me to add what has already been said. So the topic is light at the end of tunnel. So while we are talking about investments in the area of clean energy transition, I want to put forth what tunnels look like in this area. So a number has been mentioned here, which is around 115 billion US dollar that is required for clean energy transition in Pakistan. If we add transition in the area of mobility, that numbers goes to 175, 180 billion US dollar that is required by Pakistan to make this transition happen. So that is what tunnels look like when we see the clean energy transition for a country like Pakistan. So where is the light? When I look at the climate finance landscape of the globe, the number that is often quoted is that in 2020, 632 billion US dollar were mobilized in the area of climate finance. So I heard this number so many times that I try to dig into that number. I mean, what that number actually means and where this 630 billion US dollar is lying, so that at least part of that can be brought in and we can mobilize that money for the companies and we can make USAID happy that we have mobilized that money. That is mandate of our project. So when I looked at that number, so what comes out, I mean, as a surprise or whatever we can call it, only 17% of that money is coming to developing countries like ours. And 80% of that money is commercial lending. No subsidy, no, you can say, grants. Out of that 20%, that is not commercial financing. I believe it was 14% that is concessional and only 6% that is in the form of grant. Another dimension, as Rabia Sahib has mentioned already, I mean, salvation lies within. So 80% of that is domestic financing. It's not like the money is flowing cross-border to make that investment happen. So where does that leave us? Where is the light for a country like Pakistan in this scenario? Honorable Minister mentioned that we import $24 billion worth of energy every year. This year, this number is around 20 billion US dollar. And when we look into that number, we consume $4 billion worth of petrol in our motorbikes. So out of that $20 billion, $4 billion is spent in our motorbikes. And when I look at the targets, the medium-term targets in the area of transition towards e-mobility, we have 100,000 cars running on electricity. We have 500,000 motorbikes running on electricity, 1,000 buses and 1,000 trucks. You know how much money it will take to make that transition happen? $4 billion US. So the amount that we spent in the petrols of motorbike can help us achieve the medium-term target that we have vis-a-vis transition toward e-mobility targets that we have in front of us. I mean, case can be built around clean energy, solar, wind in each area. So the argument is that we have the resources available with us to have this transition. I mean, and this transition is happening already. Last year alone, Pakistani households, I'm not talking about corporates, Pakistani households imported solar panels worth of $1 billion US. Pakistani households, private equity coming out of people's pocket. So liquidity is there. So that is one light at the end of tunnel. Another point that I would want your attention is that however meager that climate finance number are that are flowing across border, $4 billion, $20 billion of that reached our region, South Asia. And the number that reached our country was a meager $300 million US. Out of $20 billion of climate finance, already $300 million US reached our country, Pakistan. So why was that? I mean, we can make a long list of issues associated with our policies. But I mean, as I am working with the private sector, courtesy of Private Finance Advisory Network project that we are implementing in Pakistan, I would put forth the issues that are associated with our private sector. We don't have enough A-class companies in our country. I mean, we have one representation in this hall who is the I would like to I happen to work with them for a separate project, but Artistic Miller is here in the hall. But Pakistan has, for a country like Pakistan, we need many more companies who are governed in a corporate responsible manner. When we are trying to support the companies to raise finance under our PPSC project, I mean, that is the issue that comes across to us all the time. It's not the business that get supported, it's the sponsors. It's the people behind the business who get sponsored. So one issue that I foresee for Pakistan, and it's entirely within our ambit of power to resolve that, is that we build A-class companies with A-class management systems, with A-class responsibility, with A-class transparency. There is no way around that if we want to mobilize finance towards us in a very competitive world. The other issues are, one point has already been made, is this innovative financing. The concept that is being implementing around the globe nowadays is blended finance, how minimum public money, whether it is coming from government or whether it is coming from development sector, can be used to leverage how much private money. So that is the issue. People are coming up with numbers like $1 enough to mobilize $25, $60, $80 vis-a-vis different financial instrument that has been deployed around the globe. And we need to look at that in our context as well, what suits us the best. And finally, I mean, it would be reiterating what other people or Ahad has mentioned already in his presentation is our legal and institutional framework. We need one company during the energy crisis of Pakistan, they shifted their shoe manufacturing business in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka's economy has gone to wherever we want to take it, to the bottom. But they were able to repatriate their profits in US dollar during the time when they did not even have a deal with IMF in place. So that was the commitment of Sri Lankan government regarding their agreements with the foreign investment that has come to that country. We should try to ensure that whatever we commit, we comply with that. I would say a few sentences regarding the project that we are implementing. Our project, a project is Private Finance Advisory Network in Pakistan, which is a project development facility, and we try to support clean energy businesses to raise financing. Currently, we have 48 active projects in our pipeline in the broad area of clean energy, e-mobility, bioenergy, etc. And we are trying to mobilize more than $450 million for those projects. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Madamar Yasser Saab. I think highlighting the need for all the private sector to somehow become responsible is very important. And I personally believe that it can only happen when we sort of propagate the economic case of doing good going forward. So next up, I would request Dr. Amira Sawas, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, who is currently the head of research and policy at the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative UK. And ma'am, since you have been working on similar things in Pakistan for a long time, we would like to have your feedback here. Thank you.
No.
It's working.
Hi, everyone. It's a lot of information today. I'm trying to absorb and really think through some of the really interesting work that's been shared. But I'm also feeling quite restless because we've been sitting still for a while. So if anybody feels they need to stand up and walk around while I'm talking, I will take no offense to it, because maybe it'll sort of bring us all up a little bit. So my name's Amira, and I've been working on climate change in different countries, but mostly in Pakistan since about 2011. I've done a lot of work on the impacts, a lot of work on gender equality, a lot of work on solar investments, and now I'm working on something called Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is an idea that I'm coming to share with you today. I'm coming not as somebody who's coming from the outside saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. I understand the contextual challenges and the opportunities in Pakistan. And so our organization is just sharing about this initiative, and basically we want to have conversations about it. So I'll share a little bit about why I'm working on this now, and then about the initiative itself. Okay. I don't think the slide thing's working. Ah, it is. Okay. All right, I don't think I need to reiterate what's already been said. Climate change is the biggest global threat, not just on a short-term horizon, but on a long-term horizon. So this is the World Economic Forum's, what is this called? The Global Risks Report, where they ask different policymakers across the world and the private sector and civil society what they think the biggest risks are. The green is basically environment and climate. I don't think I need to go into too much detail about that. There's been so much elaboration of that today already. What I would say that's very reassuring for me is when I first came to Pakistan in, I think, 2011, the conversation about climate change, despite the massive floods that had happened So my PhD was on the floods, just after the floods, the flood response. I spent a lot of time in different parts of Pakistan with the communities, talking to policymakers and the conversation was not, it was so different to how it is now. So that's testament to the work that you're all doing. That's really fantastic. That's brought the conversation along. But yeah, there is the Paris Agreement, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. So this global negotiation where governments have agreed to reduce or attempt to reduce global warming to 1.5 degrees C by 2050. We're not doing very well on the plan there, unfortunately, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And what's really challenging about the Paris Agreement, although it's important and needs to exist, is it doesn't mention fossil fuels at all, even though fossil fuels have caused 86% of carbon emissions over the last decade. So there's a huge gap that needs to be filled. Oh, all right. So this is from a new report, which is called the Production Gap Report. So this is from UNEP, the Stockholm Environment Institute and others. This just came out about on the 7th of November. So what they've done is they're looking at the planned fossil fuel production that governments are committing to and the private sector in the future. And currently with the planned production, we're 110% more fossil fuel. We've got 110% more fossil fuels, so more than double than is needed to reach the 1.5 degree goal. So basically with current plans, reaching the 1.5 degree goal is impossible. And if I can just share the difference in what that means. So the difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees of warming, it doesn't sound like a lot, does it? Half a degree, not a big deal. But actually it's about 100 million extra people pushed into poverty per year. So it's absolutely huge. And then this is broken down by different fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. The red line is basically government plans and projections across the world. And the blue line is 1.5 degrees consistent. So what we've got here is that we've got 460% over on coal production, 29% on oil, and 82% over on gas production. So having this global, the conference that we have, the COP and the conversations around emissions is important, but it's not dealing with this. And so we're not going to be able to reach our goals if we don't come up with a new idea. All right, and there has been huge investment in renewable energy, which is awesome. It's good to see that that's moving. But actually, so the first bar of this graph is from 2009, and the second bar is from last year. If you see it, we've actually increased, like the global market share of fossil fuels has actually increased. So yes, renewables investment is happening, but fossil fuels are not reducing. And this is from the IEA, International Energy Agency's data. So we have a problem that we need to fix, and we need to find ways to do it that are sort of positive and collaborative and overcome the polarization that exists at the moment. This is another graph from another report that came out last week. This is called, so the first report I talked about was called the Global Production Gap Report. UNEP released that one. This one is also from UNEP, I believe, this came out last week, which is about the emissions gap. So they look at all the nationally determined contributions together, and then they look at what does this mean for our future trajectory? Can we reach 1.5 degrees? Not at the moment. So currently we're on a trajectory of 2.5 to 2.9 degrees Celsius. And that's if all governments actually implement the plans that they have. A lot of the plans are very positive and well-intentioned, but actually, are they structurally possible? Becomes a question. If we look at history, about 80% of this comes from G20 countries. So there is an issue of fairness and equity, and it's unfortunately countries like Pakistan that suffer as a result of this inequality in the kind of global production of fossil fuels. Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about this. What's in it for Pakistan? I don't want to overgo, you all know this, I don't want to talk about things that you know extremely well, but Pakistan is particularly vulnerable, as has been shared today, and it could reach warming of 4.9 degrees, which is extreme, probably one of the biggest, kind of most extreme examples of climate impacts in the world. So it's not just about, when I started working on climate change, I would get a lot of pushback, and I understood it. I would hear things like, oh, this is a Western concept, you're pushing this on us, you don't want us to develop, you did this for decades and you benefited and you want to stop our development. And I completely understand that perspective. You know, we live in an economy that is the result of kind of colonial power dynamics, and that has to change. But if Pakistan doesn't make the changes, as the senator said, Pakistan's the one that's going to suffer. It's not about others, it's about Pakistan. There's also huge loss and damage, as you experienced, unfortunately, last year. It made me really sad because my PhD was on the 2010, 2011 floods, and this time the floods were worse. So the climate change is happening, and there has to be a very kind of really structural change in order to provide the resilience that communities need. And that structural change has to be at a global level as well as at a national level. So I think it was the IMF calculated the loss and damages from the floods last year. It's up to over 30 billion US dollars. What does that do? Every time you have a climate extreme, the debt burden becomes an issue, pushes countries like Pakistan further into debt. The other thing is that, and this is some research that my organization did before I joined, but I'm always happy to share it, fossil fuels challenge every single sustainable development goal. So like every single goal that you have, that you've signed up to for sustainable development, is under threat if you continue to use and produce fossil fuels. But where I see shoots of hope is Pakistan's leadership in climate diplomacy. In policy and programming as well, I've seen it, and particularly last year, you know, obviously a devastating flood happened, but Pakistan really stood up in the global community and said, this is not acceptable and the power dynamics need to change and we need a loss and damage fund. And since I've worked on that for a long time, everybody in this space that I know knows that that would not have happened without Pakistan's leadership. So I don't want you to forget the leadership that you have and the opportunity that you have. And I loved what the senator said when he talked about the reality of the global economy. You know, we've been sold this story that we're this, you know, global village and, you know, the patchwork, you know, we're all part of the same thing. Our thinking is actually we don't need to play into the existing structures. We need to create new structures, and those structures need to be created by countries like Pakistan in collaboration with other countries to change the power dynamics, not just kind of fall into the same trap that you're forced into basically by the global economy. So just think about the potential there. You know, you could be a global leader in just energy transition, but you could also shape the conversation about how fossil fuels and how climate change is done in future. So this is again from the International Energy Agency, the CEO. Basically, they release a report every couple of years looking at the state of energy. I'm sure many of you have seen it. And what the CEO basically said is, the renewable energy transition is unstoppable. So basically, get on the bus and benefit, be one of the first movers, or later on, the suffering will happen if you stay baked into fossil fuel production. But there's no global agreement right now. It's not going to happen through the Paris Agreement and the COP process. It's just not there. There's huge fossil fuel lobbies, to be honest with you, that makes it really, really difficult. So we need an agreement, and we need that agreement to be shaped and driven by countries who are experiencing the worst climate impacts and who've been put in a disadvantaged position. At the moment, the risks are absolutely huge to not make the changes. I mean, some of the risks are, and I'm not a financial expert, and many of you are, I believe, stranded assets and financial turmoil is a major risk of continuing to invest in fossil fuel infrastructure that will become redundant as the kind of global market shifts. But there are also massive risks to health and well-being. 1 in 5 deaths globally are related to the pollution caused by fossil fuel infrastructure. Just think about that. 1 in 5 people, their death is related to our continued reliance on fossil fuels. So I don't want to go into all the lists, but there's just a lot there. There's a huge case to be made, and we want to be helpful. So the organization I work for, we call it the Treaty Initiative or the Fossil Fuel Treaty. We're not telling countries you need to do X, Y, and Z. We're saying to countries, let's think about shaping something different, and countries should be in the lead of that, and it should be focused on cooperation. But we have to understand the global context as well. So why do we need international cooperation? Why do we need something different? So this is an example, and this was done by an organization called the Civil Society Equity Review, bunch of scientists and civil society experts, and they didn't have data on Pakistan when they did this, which is why you can't see that on the graph. But basically, what we have here is some countries have a more difficult transition to make because they have higher dependencies, either due to, well, mainly economic factors or power factors. And some countries like the UK, where I'm from, don't have as much of a dependency and don't have as much of a difficult transition. So should absolutely not be investing in coal or gas infrastructure. And, many of us are very, very frustrated about that. But if I just sort of simplify this for you, there are 4 categories that we're thinking about at the moment. So you need the countries that need to make a really rapid wind down, and they're the countries that have been historically responsible. So those G20 countries primarily that I was talking about, they need to stop investing in fossil fuels immediately, and they also need to support others to make the transition. Then you've got those who have a lower dependence on the infrastructure and on the fossil fuel supply, so they can wind down rapidly, but maybe they need a bit of support and, a bit of financing or a bit of technical support. And then you have those that are more dependent because of historical factors or because of economic power dynamics, and they need to be supported over time to make that transition. And so we're looking at these 4 categories of countries, and what we want to do is support them to work together to provide financial support as well as technical. So the treaty at the moment, it has 8 countries that has endorsed it. It came from Pacific Island states who have contributed literally nothing to the climate crisis, but are experiencing the worst, countries like Pakistan in a lot of ways. So through working with them and others and civil society scientists, looking at the IPCC literature, talking to businesses and others, we've got 3 pillars of the fossil fuel treaty. One is a just transition. Obviously, the transition needs to be rapid, but it needs to be just. It needs to be just for oil and coal workers as much as it needs to be just for communities who are experiencing devastating floods. We need to just stop expanding any new coal, oil, or gas. And that is not just a civil society perspective. That is the perspective of the International Energy Agency and others. So this is really something that we have consensus around now. And the phase out needs to be fair. And with that fairness, we need to look at who's historically responsible and who should be supporting. We're modeling this off of successful treaties that have happened. So there's 5 here. There are more treaties that have happened. But if you take the nuclear treaty, for example, that only took 2 years to negotiate, I believe, just over 2 years. So when you have the right conditions, when you have states taking leadership, working with civil society and business and others, you can get a treaty which is generally, it's fairly effective. Give or take some global power dynamics, it's generally working. You can have treaties that work. So we're speaking to the organizations and the people that were involved in those processes, as well as the plastics treaty, which is happening right now, and learning from their experience, learning from what went wrong, what went right, and so that we can try and do this even better. And these are the states that have supported so far. We're going to have hopefully a couple of other states endorse quite soon. What we want to do is just really support that infrastructure of states to get together. My role is to provide the evidence. So for example, what does a just transition look like in Pakistan? I know there's a lot of work going on already, but we need to think about it at a national level. We need to think about it at a sector level. We need to think of ways that civil society and businesses work together instead of being kind of in clashes with each other. We need to find those kind of common grounds that overcome polarization. And we've been endorsed so far by 2,250 civil society organizations, I think over 1,000 Nobel laureates, people from 117 countries, a number of the green dots are subnational governments. So for example, the state of California endorsed quite recently. And so there is a kind of movement happening, but now, yeah, we want to start working more with producer countries. So our latest endorser, Timor-Leste, is a producer country that wants to make that transition, but wants support to do so. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for listening. I know it's been a long day, and please feel free to get in touch if you'd like to talk about it.
Thank you, Dr. Amira. I think it was really insightful the way you sort of created the commonality between economics of climate change, poverty, and other social issues. So next up, I would request now for the session chair, Mr. Shahjahan Mirza, Managing Director, PPIB, to come on stage and conclude the session. Thank you, sir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Learned panelist, distinguished audience, and STPI team. First of all, I sincerely congratulate STPI for continuing this Sustainable Development Conference for 26 years continuously. I think that's a great achievement and a great step in bringing together some of the brightest professionals in their disciplines and share the thoughts and share the research and the outcomes of various papers and everything, which actually enlightens everyone and take towards the recommendation which can actually take it forward. So I think it is always a challenge to be the last speaker in any seminar, in any session. And second challenge I have been given the job of the concluding remarks. So what I have heard and what I have learned from all this today's discussion, I think that's a very, very great and insight learning which was here. And the number which have been spoken here that are really mind-boggling: $115 billion for clean energy transition. Coming from the power sector, I have my own number. If I look at the ambitious plan which government of Pakistan as a country has to bring in 60 to 62% clean energy into the grid, which is currently exactly 31%. It's the hydro, solar, wind, some of the bagasse projects, so it's 31%. So we are targeting to take it to 62% by 2031, which is only 8-9 years away. So this number, if actually our generation expansion plan says that this requires $52 billion of investment in the capex and opex by 2031. And this is the generation side only. Our weakest link in this power chain is our transmission and distribution system. So another maybe 30 billion, 25 billion would be required to upgrade the infrastructure. So in total, we're talking about $70 to $75 billion just to basically meet the target of 62% of energy. So these are the numbers, and obviously what Senator Musaddiq Malik has said, that the important thing is the sustainability and indigenization. What we have seen in this Ukraine crisis, that all countries which are more dependent, like Pakistan, on the imported energy, they have suffered a lot. To give you maybe a bad example here for a clean energy session, the coal. We started coal with the expectation, I think that was like $65–70 per ton in early 2013-14 when these projects were planned. And in the Ukraine war, and we were thinking, everyone was thinking that this coal is going to be dirt cheap because that is the least preferred, unlike fuel. But in the Ukraine war, what we have seen, that crossed $450 per ton. So that is the kind of uncertainties we get into when we rely too much on the imported energy and the imported fuel, which we have seen very amply. So the solution which lies that the indigenization, which gives you the energy security, and of course, as have been said by many speakers, Pakistan is fortunate in that sense that we have abundant resources of all the renewable one can think of. We have huge hydro resource, we have abundant sunlight, we have abundant wind resources. But the only thing we are lacking, I think this is not only the energy sector, we're lacking a proper planning and a proper leadership. What we do here, if I'm sorry, being part of the government, being criticizing, the planning division is supposed to be, and it should be, the brain of the country. taking the overall country's planning and targets, economic growth, energy growth, everything. But unfortunately, what has been happening in Pakistan, and it is still happening, that all the ministries, all the divisions, the provinces, they send their own schemes to the Planning Commission. And what Planning Commission does, that they only look at the scheme and they tell that here the cost is high, here the design should be changed, here the amount should be reduced. So that kind of input, what planning is given. So we need to revamp the whole planning system of the country if we want to take the country forward, and we want to achieve some of the target which we have seen here. Because with this current approach which we are working, I'm sorry to be a bit pessimistic here, but I don't think as a country we can reach anywhere with this approach. What we're doing, we heard a word of integrated energy planning, which is very, very essential and important. USAID has helped to develop a model for that, and I think it's just sitting in the Planning Commission and nobody is working on that. So the major thing lies that we should actually determine that what is our destination, what we want to do. In these kind of seminars, it is really exciting to learn. It is really exciting to know the information. But when it comes to making the policies, we have heard the continuity of policy and few words which have come again and again. That is the sustainability. So sustainability is a very broader word. Senator Malik actually gave the 3 dimensions. So the affordability, the energy security is this part of the sustainability. And in Pakistan context, indigenization is very, very important in terms of sustainability. What we have seen in this foreign exchange crisis that we are still facing, we're not out of it, that we have been stopping the payments of $1 million, $2 million. And as Hamad was mentioning that in the Sri Lanka, they did not face that thing. So these kind of things, but I think one thing which is very, very critical in Pakistan context, and we're quite behind in that, and that is the coordination and interaction between the research institute and the academia and the government. Even today in this session, I don't see many government officials who are really the decision makers and who work in this field. So this, unless we create this coordination and evidence-based policy, that word has been spoken here. So how our policies are made, I think everyone knows. The government changes. Every government, every party has its own agenda, and the projects are not actually bottom-up approach. They don't come from the grassroots level. By analyzing that what is needed by the country, they come from the top, that this is the priority, this is our political priority, this is our other priority. So that's why we're suffering. We have we have made a lot of investment in the power sector even, but when we were making investment on the generation side, for which PPIB is usually blamed that probably they have done too much of power generation in the country and created excess capacity. But the thing is, what I mentioned in the beginning, that somebody should have planned. PPIB was given a target. There was a growth projection of 4 to 5% of GDP. There was a export growth projections. There was a requirement of the transmission line. So PPIB performed, and the remaining all departments or all division or all section, they could not perform to that level. So I think that's what is needed. So what we are suffering now, as we see in the wind curtailment case study, that basically this is lack of planning, and once we plan, that is lack of implementation. So we lack in both of the things. So we need to work on that, and with this kind of conference, with this kind of discussion, what I usually expect is that we give some good recommendations to the government so that they can implement it. And one thing I think as a nation we have a habit of starting with the big things. Just to criticize my own sector, we started in the early 90s, late 80s, that we'll open the power sector for private investment. And what we did, that was the 1292 megawatt fuel oil-based power plant. And what we claimed at that time, and still claim, that Pakistan was a pioneer of IPPs in this whole region. So we were above every country in the Asia, leaving aside Japan and other 1 or 2 countries. But what was the result? That we have actually come up with a project which has become a major liability for the country now. So rather than going stepwise and doing the pilot project, experimenting and learning, we always like that we will go the biggest in the world, biggest in the Asia, biggest in the South Asia. So I think that mentality should change. We should move stepwise ahead, and we should plan that where we want to reach. So that is, I think, the crux of the whole thing as per my understanding. So all this discussion which we have done today, I think that's, at least for me, it's quite enlightening, and it was a great learning. But from this great learning, I think there should come up some concrete recommendation. I'm not too sure how many of them government will implement, or government will be able to implement. But still, I think this kind of work and the research work, it is really helpful. The evidence-based policy, I think that is the word which every government officer, every government decision maker should know, that this is not the way to make the policy, that we give the policy makers, okay, we need the policy next week. You go and do work and make some policy which we approve, and then in the end we see that there's no result of that policy. So I think that's are the few things. So we are basically here to basically discuss and do some brainstorming. So I'm really enlightened with this discussion, and we should work together actually to take this initiative forward. We have a lot of learned international speakers as well in this 3-day session. So whatever we can learn, we can actually apply in Pakistan. I think that will be our success, and that will be success of this conference. So with this, I stop here. So not taking too much time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shahjahan Saab. I think very pertinent comments on both policy making as well as implementation. So now we come to the end of this plenary. I'll just like to thank Mr. Michael Williamson, Section Chief, Energy Division, UNSCAP, Senator Musaddiq Malik, Member Senate of Pakistan, who was the chief guest for the session, Mr. Shahjahan Mirza, who chaired the session, Mr. Amir Paracha, President, Overseas Investors Chamber of Commerce and CEO, Unilever, Ms. Rabia Bukhari, Development Program Specialist, Energy and Climate, USAID, Mr. Ahmad Amar Yasir, Chief of Party, Pakistan Private Sector Energy Activity, PFAN, and Dr. Amira Subhas, Head Research and Policy at the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, UK. And lastly, Dr. Hina Aslam, who is our visiting fellow. And lastly, I think I should also mention that this session was a joint product of PPSC and STPI, and the main organizers behind this included Dr. Khalid Walid, Ubaidur Rahman, Saleha, Zona, Zainab, and of course others that I might not remember at the moment. So I'd like you all to give a round of applause for the organizers as well. So thank you. And so the dinner will be served at 8 p.m. So we can have a small networking break. And till that time, I think we can have a group picture on the stage.